Our Lamed Zayin, Amud Beis, 37b. Continuing now with Tzitzis. So we had yesterday, we'll back up a little bit. We'll conclude the Gemara, then we'll do the Halacha. So we had yesterday three different halachic ramifications as to whether you're of the view that the four strings of your tzitzis, the four tzitzis, right? We mentioned this yesterday. Talis means garment, and tzitzis are the actual fringes, the actual strings. So if the four tzitzis are four separate mitzvahs or one mitzvah divided into four parts. And the distinctions are, one, if you had only three strings hanging, can you wear those tzitzis on Shabbos? You only had three tzitzis hanging out of your talis, can you wear it on Shabbos? If each one's an individual mitzvah, then when you're walking in the street, you're not carrying, you're wearing legitimate garments. But if it's one mitzvah divided into four parts and you're missing one and you don't have any mitzvah, then those three extra tzitzis are rendered valuable but useless to you. You want them because you're going to use it later to fix your tzitzis. But at the moment they serve no purpose, then you're carrying.
Unless you're using it as a garment, strictly as a garment, and saying
those strings are not
myself warm.
Those strings are not providing any usefulness. So that you're not carrying the garment, you're carrying the strings, because they provide no usefulness. So that's the thing. If those strings are so small that they're bottle, they're secondary to the actual garment, then you wouldn't be carrying. That's why I said they're valuable, but fulfill no purpose. In other words, I still want to keep them because I'm going to fix them later. But right now, they serve no purpose for me. That's carrying.
But you said wearing the garment.
But the strings are hanging off the garment. There's three strings hanging off the garment, and they serve no purpose to you.
But they're attached to the garment. You're not.
They still serve no purpose.
You're not carrying the strings. They're attached to the garment, which you're.
It's still considered carrying in that they serve no purpose to your clothing at the moment. Not even aesthetic. Like even an aesthetic purpose, if you had tassels hanging on your shirt or something, the purpose is aesthetics. This serves no aesthetic purpose or anything. You only want them for the mitzvah that they're going to provide for you later, right, when you fix your tzitzis. So you only want them for later, which means right now, what are you doing? You're just carrying them around. Right? But if they're four different distinct mitzvahs, then I have three out of the four. So I want them right now. They're useful.
Right.
The same. Sorry.
Being one of the corners missing a string makes the whole garment
invalid.
Okay.
Makes it. Yeah, that's one view, which is the halacha, or the other view, which says that they're four distinct mitzvahs. Another distinction would be, if you're the view that there are four distinct mitzvahs, or one is with the issue of shatnez, right? One's not allowed to mix wool and linen, but the positive commandment to have tzitzis overrides that. So if you had linen talis, you had a linen garment, and the tzitzis, the strings are wool, then that is okay, because the positive commandment of wearing tzitzis overrides the negative commandment of prohibition against mixing wool and linen. Now again, if you had three out of four of those, so if it's an invalid pair of tzitzis, then you are violating the prohibition of wearing wool and linen. If each of the four are an individual mitzvah, then with the strings that are hanging, I'm doing a mitzvah, and therefore I have the power of the mitzvah to be able to override the prohibition. And then the third one was
4 and 5 corners.
Oh, that's right. If you have 5 corners on your garment, the halacha tells us, the Gemara tells us later, that when the Torah says a garment of 4 corners needs to have tzitzis, it's a minimum of 4, and if at 5, 6, 7, you would still need to have tzitzis. So the question is, if you had a garment of 5, or say 6 corners, a hexagon and a pentagon and a hexagon, then how many tzitzis would you need to have? So if you're of the view that each of the 4 corners, each of the 4 strings are an individual mitzvah, then that means each corner requires its own tzitzis. So if I had a garment of 5 corners, then 5 tzitzis hanging. But if I'm of the view that the 4 tzitzis, the 4 strings, the 4 fringes are one mitzvah, then that's the unit. It's a mitzvah of a unit of 4. So it doesn't matter how many corners I have, I still have a unit of 4. The halacha, as I said yesterday, is but that's the line we concluded with yesterday, that the halacha is, even though the Gemara mentions here in the name of Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Shmuel that the halacha follows Rabbi Shmuel, that each of the 4 are an independent mitzvah, the halacha remains today, as the Gemara concludes, that it's one mitzvah divided into 4 parts. And therefore, all the ramifications apply. If you had only 3 out of 4, it's completely invalid and you couldn't wear it on Shabbos. Likewise, if it's 3 out of 4, you would be in violation of wool and linen if that were the materials. And likewise, if you had a garment of 5 corners, then you'd only have 4 tzitzis. And as halacha describes, you put them at the corners that are farthest from each other, right? Because you have different options as to which corners. And also, we also mentioned yesterday that because there's a double-edged sword here. If you put 5 strings on your 5-cornered garment, then according to the view that says you're only supposed to have 4, which is the halacha, you will have violated the prohibition of adding to the mitzvahs, because you've added a 5th string. On the other hand, if you only put 4, even though that's the halacha, but at least according to another view, Rabbi Shmuel, you haven't satisfied your mitzvah of tzitzis because you need a 5th one. And therefore the halacha suggests it's best never to wear a garment that has more than 4 corners. 3 is fine because not required to have tzitzis. And the simple solution to it is rounding off the corners. But when it comes to rounding off the corners, as we said yesterday, if you rounded them off by stitching them, not by cutting it, it would still be considered a valid corner that requires tzitzis.
Actually, it's thinking by 3. You don't think Rabbi Shmuel's view at all would say it's pater completely, because according to his view, it would have to be put on 3.
According to his view,
Rabbi Shmuel, each one is.
So why does the pasuk say arba kanfos? No, I think it's a minimum of 4, isn't it?
Unless he says you have to have, or you have to beg it of 4 anyways, and then.
Yeah, the pasuk says arba kanfos. The question is,
that's true.
It's a minimum of 4. I don't think.
Yeah, that's true.
I have a shirt.
Okay.
That has 2 corners, but it has 4 other corners that are stitched together to each to make no corners.
4 other corners.
Right. So there's.
Is that the way it was always made?
I bought it like that.
It's not required in tzitzis.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. In other words, if you stitched them together, it'd be a different story. Thank you.
Oh, meant to be separate, but then you stitch.
No, it's not a corner that was stitched. Part of the design is to have a stitch going up some part. That's the way I would think about it. I have to see it, but I think so. Okay, so let's now see further in the Gemara, and then we'll look at the Shulchan Aruch. More about what we talked about.
So polos, we have like a cut in each side.
That's not considered a corner. It's too low. It's a slit. In order for a corner, it has to
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the split in the corners have to go farther up.
Really?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, again, this is from memory. Haven't looked at this recently, but I'm not mistaken. It's going to be at least 50% up. If not, it has to be minimum 51%, I think.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, which is why they have like those undershirt tzitzis. You ever seen those undershirt tzitzis?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
So they're stitched under here, but you'll see they're split very high up. They're stitched only a little bit up there, so that the corners are separate from each other enough.
Dry fit, like those dry fit or the.
Something like that, yeah. The point is they stitched them together up here, not farther down, so that you actually have a proper split. Again, this is from memory, those polo shirts with the little slit doesn't count as corners.
Oh.
Yeah.
So probably that shirt won't count.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the Gemara continues. This is an interesting Gemara. Ravina. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom of the page. Third to last word, Ravina. Excuse me. Ravina have a ka'azil abasrei demar baravashi. Ravina was walking behind Master, son of Ravashi. Sir, son of Ravashi. B'Shabbata, on Shabbos, the regila of Yom Tif. So I guess it was Shabbos Chalamoid or something, or maybe Shabbos on Yom Tif itself. He's walking behind him. Ifsik karne dechote, and he saw that there's one of the 4 strings hanging on his talis, hanging on his tzitzis, ripped off and fell. V'lei Omar lei v'loi midi. And Ravina did not tell Rashi anything. Now he's walking in the street, and we mentioned earlier the halacha is that if you're missing one of the 4, it's invalid, thus making the other 3 that are hanging desirable items that are at the moment not fulfilling a purpose and thus constitute carrying on Shabbos. So Ravina should have said something, telling Mar Baravashi, look, I don't think you realize, but you're carrying your tzitzis because they're invalid at the moment. not only is there an issue of carrying your tzitzis, there's also the issue of the fact that you're wearing a garment that requires tzitzis and you don't have tzitzis. Right? The Torah says that when you have a garment of four corners, you have to wear tzitzis. So if you have a garment of four corners and you don't have tzitzis, you're in violation of the positive commandment. Even though it's not a prohibition, but it's a violation of the assay, it's a violation of the positive commandment.
Excuse me, if that is missing one tzitzit, is carrying the talit?
No, he's carrying the other strings.
I know, no, he's not carrying.
He's carrying the other strings. Because
Beged is okay.
the talus is a beged, is a garment, that's clothing, that's fine. The strings are carrying.
As an
Okay.
example, if you have keys hanging on, say, from a belt that does no purpose, it's like you have to make a key belt. I think they'll do that. They're not criticized. They put like a string and they hang the keys from
Yeah,
the
yeah,
belt. That's not really good because it's not doing anything. It's carrying.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, it's very complicated making the Shabbos key wrap.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll do the halachas there because it's not as simple as people make it out to be. But anyway, yeah, the principle is the same. It has to provide some usefulness to your clothing. Anyway, ignorance should remain bliss. Maybe for a moment.
Never carry a key. I avoid the problem.
Yeah, use just get a
That's
combination
one
for
of the
your
rules
for your
that
house.
they do.
Have a
That's
guard
one
dog.
of-
Regard.
Oh, well, they have key belts.
Yeah.
The Shabbos key belts.
That's one of the.
Even so, it has to be. The belt itself has to provide a usefulness.
Yeah,
If the only purpose that string you're wearing
Carrying.
is holding the
If
the
there's
key,
a belt, yeah.
then it doesn't do anything.
No,
It has to
the
provide
belt,
some.
For me,
Like, for example,
The
you wear
belt.
a
Never mind. The key has to be. Never mind that the key. First, there's two conditions primarily. Number one, the key has to provide some usefulness to the belt.
That's right.
Isn't that the key closes the actual loop of the belt, not just stuck into the belt? Number one. Number two, the belt you're wearing, independent of the key, has to provide some usefulness to you.
Yeah.
So if you already have all your belts on, what is this extra string? What are you doing?
Yes.
Then it's just carrying then the string is just carrying the key. So the simplest solution is if you wear it under your shirt, it's holding your tzitzis down.
That's right.
It's holding
Or
your tzitzis,
or the tie.
or it's holding your tie down. So the belt itself has to
function.
have some function.
What about the key?
So and the key closes the loop of the belt. In other words, the key closes the loop of the belt. So the key provides a usefulness to the belt, becomes part of your belt. But the belt itself has to provide you some usefulness. Otherwise, it's not a garment. Otherwise, it's like those strings hanging at the corner where you're just carrying it, even though it happens to be wrapped around you. It has to provide some.
Right.
It's not holding up your pants.
That's more the easy part.
Oh, so the key
The key is what to do with is the key should have a function.
At the key is your.
That's awesome. Yeah.
The key is like the belt buckle.
Exactly.
The belt buckle, or if you had a string. No, let's say you're using a string that's holding down your tzitzis,
Right.
which is a usefulness because it's a proper thing in halacha to make sure that your tzitzis are always retaining its minimum width of an am. So the easiest way to do it is to tuck it into your pants, or you can put it. So some people wear a string under their shirt to hold the tzitzis in place. So if this string that you have your key on is doing that, then to close the string, instead of making a knot to tie it to each other, you tie one end into one side of the key, the other end to the other side of the key, and the key now closes the loop of your useful string that's holding your tzitzis down.
Right.
And thus the key is actually providing a garment function. That's the main point here. But anyway, we digress. But related, I guess. So anyway, Rabbi was walking behind Rabbi Bashi, one of the corners ripped, and he didn't say anything. When they got home, Amar Lehi, so Ravina told Rashi, Mahasam Ifsik, back there, your tzitzis ripped. So Amar Lehi, so Rav Ashi, so Marbar Rav Ashi told Ravina,
Should have told me beforehand.
I amres le mahasam. Had you told me then, Shadisi, I would take it off.
When you would carry them, these
No.
Why you tell me before?
Yeah, tell me before. I would have taken it off. I wouldn't have been carrying these three tzitzis the whole time.
Yeah.
So Ravina responded by saying, Va'amar mar, but Master said, Gadol kavod abrius. It's a beautiful teaching here. Great is the honor of creatures, people, being respectful of people. Shedoiches lois shibatorah. That it pushes off, it overrides a prohibition of the Torah. So there's a prohibition for you to carry on Shabbos, but it would be disrespectful for you to take off your shirt in public. Presumably, it's not like us, we have all of our clothing, and we have a tzitzis also. It's quite likely that the tzitzis he had was his garment. And if he were to take it off, he'd be walking around shirtless, essentially. So I didn't want to embarrass you in public. And we have this principle that says that the honor and respect, the dignity of a human being overrides even a prohibition. And therefore I didn't want to tell you in public. I didn't want to embarrass you.
What, he's going to carry tzitzit?
No, well,
Yes.
that's more-
Okay, we're not done yet, but this is the argument that Ravina is making.
It's not, yeah.
This is the argument he's presenting, which is quite something. So Ravina responded by saying that, look, I didn't want to embarrass you in public by this principle. So Mar Bar Rashi says, but Tergimar Rav Bar Shava Kamed Rav Kana, but it has been interpreted by Rav the son of Shava, I'm supposed to pronounce the name, in the presence of Rav Kana, that this statement which says that one should override a prohibition rather than embarrass somebody is restricted to the lav de loy saser. It's restricted to the prohibition of loy saser, which is, the verse says, one should not, it's a biblical commandment, in fact. It's like a biblical contingent on a rabbinic, in that the verse says, you should not deter from the words of your sages. So in other words, the commandment is rabbinic, but the Torah gives it a stamp by saying, do not divert from that which the sages say. And therefore, only when the prohibition is a rabbinical one, then this rule applies that you can override the rabbinical prohibition rather than embarrass somebody in public. But if it's a biblical one, very sorry, you got to take off your tzitzis. You're carrying on Shabbos. So Rav Ashi now is basically saying, you should have told me earlier. Even though it would have embarrassed me in public, even though you would have embarrassed me in public, but that embarrassment is okay for me to take on, so that I save myself from violating a biblical commandment of carrying on Shabbos. And the principle you were citing, which is that you would rather not embarrass someone than allow them to violate a prohibition rather than embarrass them, is limited to a rabbinic prohibition. And here the issue is biblical because I'm carrying on Shabbos. End of version 1 of the story.
The similar story where brackets we did, wearing shatnez.
That's correct.
One's wearing shatnez in a public place. The shatnez, the dressing, you have to take off. He's naked. That's obvious. And this is Torah overrides, but it's only shatnez rabbanan.
Yeah.
Then you can leave it on and then take it off when you're home.
Yeah.
Same
So
principle.
we finished the story?
Yeah, there's another version of the story.
Oh.
Yeah. But
The Gemara says like this. Hikadam is another version of the story which goes like this. He didn't tell it to him when he got home, but actually Mahasam Amalei. He actually told him right there on the spot, hey, your tzitzis broke. V'amar lei, and Avashi responded, so it's a different version of the same conversation, but comes to the same conclusion, but from a different angle. V'amar lei, so this version of the story was he told him when he got home, and Mar Bavashi was upset, you should have told me earlier, allow me to get embarrassed because I don't want to violate the biblical commandment. Fine. The other version is, he actually told him on the spot, trying to save him from the biblical commandment. V'amar lei, and Avashi responded to him while he told him on the spot, my daitach, what do you want from me? The Mishnah, you want me to throw it off? You want me to take off my clothing? Well, he should, right? Because it's carrying on Shabbos.
It's biblical.
And it's biblical, presumably.
presumably, but not.
Right? So in this version, the story is, Ravina told Mar Baravashi, your tzitzis ripped. In public he tells him this. And Mar Baravashi responds by saying, what do you want me to do? Take off my clothing? Va'amar Mar, do you not know the statement of our master, which said, that great is the honor of people, is the dignity of people, that it overrides a prohibition. So what do you want me to do? Why are you making me take it off? Why are you embarrassing me? Presumably it should override the prohibition of carrying. So Ravina responded by saying, but Rav son of Sheva said the name of Rav Kana, but that this rule, this principle of maintaining dignity, even in the face of a prohibition, is limited to rabbinical prohibitions. And therefore, Ravina explained, you are in violation of a biblical prohibition because you're carrying, and therefore I'm so sorry, but I have to tell you to take off your clothing, even if it means a loss of dignity because there's a biblical prohibition. So Ravashi responded, Hachanami karmos rabbanani, but don't you realize that we're not in a biblical prohibition here? Because the public domain that we are in at the moment is not a biblical public domain. When we say public domain in English, we would consider Cleve Road a public domain. But by halachic standards, there's very, very specific rules to what makes something a public domain. And primarily, it's three conditions, options. One is it's a public market, which can handle, or actually does have, depending on how you understand it, 600,000 people in a day, or a highway. A highway, even if it has less than 600,000, if it's a highway that connects one city to the next, it's considered a biblical public domain. But Cleve Road is not considered a biblical public domain. At least it's not with respect to the laws of Shabbos. It's what's called a Carmelis. A Carmelis means it's not a public. It's not a Carmelis means it belongs to the public, but it does not have the requisite to make it a public domain for a Shabbos violation, and therefore it's only a rabbinical issue. So carrying from this building out to Cleve Road, even if there was no Erev, is not biblical necessarily. It's possible it is because it connects to the highway, which is another complicated set of laws, but let's just say it's not. And therefore, says Mar Bar Avashi to Ravina, this rule of not maintaining dignity, even in the face of prohibition, which you just correctly said is limited to a rabbinical prohibition, would apply here, because my carrying is only rabbinical in that I am in a Carmelis. And thus, Hadanlach HaKoimetz, thus ends the chapter HaKoimetz Rabbah. So we discussed this a little bit yesterday, and we're going to switch it up, God willing. Today's Wednesday. Tomorrow, Thursday, we'll learn something about Lag BaOmer B'Tz Hashem. And then on Friday, going forward, we're going to learn a chapter in Sanhedrin, Hachelek, which is very much agadic. What's the English word for that? Homiletic, kind of. It gets into prophecies, and it gets into the laws relating to Mashiach's coming, and the rules of Olam Haba, reward and punishment. As I mentioned yesterday, this is probably the closest the Gemara gets to discussing the soul. So it's going to be an interesting ride, very different than what we're doing till now, because now the last couple months has been very halachic centric, which is why we chose this Gemara. But we'll go switch it up a little bit, God willing, on Friday and then Monday going forward. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
What else we'll do is